Let's check out the weirdest romance comics I bet you've ever seen. Hey comic freaks, and welcome back to Dangerous Comics. I'm your host, Dane Georges, and today we're looking at Skin Deep by Charles Burns. Charles Burns rose to prominence in Art Spiegelman's Raw magazine in the mid-1980s, and we can see some of that work here in this Raw collection of the first 3 issues. The first 3 issues were obviously very rare, very hard to come by. Well, here we see Dog Boy. We're going to see more Dog Boy in Skin Deep, so it's cool to see how he carried a few of these stories through. Some of these themes will also be in Skin Deep. This is kind of a high-level introduction to Dog Boy. We see a little bit of his origin, that he had this heart transplant, and then now he is a man with a dog heart. But that Raw really put Charles Burns on the map, and what we're looking at here, Skin Deep, is actually the 3rd volume in a collection of Charles Burns' early work, the first being El Bora and then Big Baby. These 3 volumes would really collect all the work that Charles Burns did in Raw and other publications leading up to, his big hit Black Hole. And a lot of the themes in Black Hole he really was exploring in his early work. And there's a really amazing back cover on this edition. This is the first edition of this publication that came out by Penguin Books. These stories are outlined with these tattoos on this guy's back. So we have Dog Days, which is going to be about our man Dog Boy. We have Burn Again, which is this holy terror kind of story about religious fear. And then A Marriage Made in Hell, which was originally published in Raw 6, but Charles Burns kind of reapproaches it, puts a little bit of a new spin on it. So really cool to see how that is adapted. And we're going to highlight the differences in how it was originally published and how it appears in this publication. Hang on till the end to see that. It's also a little bit oversized. Here is my issue of Doom Skull for scale. It's more magazine size, but we open it up and we get these awesome end pages, like inside the guts of this monster. Material in this book appeared in somewhat different form between 1988 to 1991 in Big Baby, a weekly syndicated strip. An earlier version of A Marriage Made in Hell was published in Raw magazine in 1984. And still, the tables of contents throughout has been so cool. I love that we got the tattoos on the back, and then now we're having a diagram of what we're seeing here. It's pretty cool. I love how the word balloons are swooping around each other to this needle, some bone, and this weird little tumor growing off it that caterpillar's moving toward. It's freaky. It's pretty awesome. And now we jump on into Dog Days with our boy Dog Boy. I think it's really interesting throughout. Dog Boy is supposed to be presented as this freak, but everyone else that Charles Burns draws in the background is always more freaky than Dog Boy. And so we start out with another reoccurring character from Charles Burns. We get Big Baby, and that would have been the 2nd volume of this series, was Big Baby. But really cool to see the through line of kind of this universe that Charles Burns is building, and Big Baby and his friend are looking out over the fence, and they see this man digging a hole with his bare hands like a dog, and he finds his bone, he's howling at the moon, and the boys run away. So cool little transition from one character into the next. Really organic storytelling. Also really cool 9-panel grid. It's not all the gutters are aligning. There's a little bit of movement in that page. But we've got Dog Boy, he found his bone, and now he's heading home. But he walks by, everyone's looking at him like he's a freak, and he's going to go to bed. He actually sleeps in a dog house with a bowl. His house is empty. He's just putting on airs, right? He's I have to act like I'm a normal average guy. He's dreaming about girls and how he feels like such an outsider because he wants to love them, but he always seems to make the wrong impression. I love how Charles Burns is drawing Dog Boy, kind of clean-cut Bazooka Joe cartoon character, and then everyone else in this world is extremely disturbed and freaky, even though, he's the titular character because he's a freak show as well, but somehow everyone else is freakier. And so we get his origin here, and I love how we've got the panel change here, and it's all about, he goes to this doctor, and this really scary doctor, and he tells him, your heart's donezo, we got to get you a new one. And he leaves it just being oh my God, how am I ever going to pay for that? And he sees in the paper, surgery for $10, ask for Doc Benway. I love that. It feels like a Fallout kind of illustration, just those classic ads, and just really shows Charles Burns' range of style. I want you guys to take note of how many different ways Charles Burns is able to draw eyeballs, and even just with shape. But Dog Boy goes to this doctor, and when he goes, it's actually this doctor's just like house or apartment. It's all boarded up. He answers, and he's like all crazed. He's all patched up. He's pointing a gun in his face, and he's like, "Oh, I found you in the paper for surgery." Surgery? Why didn't you say so? Hey, come on in. Want a drink or something? He agrees to do what this doctor's going to do, and the doctor has an idea. He's going to give him a dog heart. He said, "Hey, they've transplanted ape hearts into humans, right? So why not a dog heart? Besides, you don't have much of a choice, do you?" And he's like smoking cigarettes, taking shots, and then this nurse gasses him out, and he's instantly having nightmares about the doctor, about the transformation of him to a dog. He's seen himself almost more like a werewolf, and he wakes up in his doghouse. "Oh, I'm going to be late for work." And then he hears a meow outside, and we get this cat that is tormenting him. Really freaky looking cat, too. I feel like it looks like a human in a suit. And so he goes to his job. He is a dishwasher, and he works with these just apes that are in the back just like laughing at him, bullying him. And then they say, "What, were you chasing some tail? Why were you late?" And he's like, "Well, sort of." But there's this new waitress that just started working there, and these guys all have the hots for her, but she only has eyes for Dog Boy. And they're trying to make fun of Dog Boy and make him perform and show off, but she thinks it's endearing, and she likes our guy. And I really like how we're cutting back and forth with more of the origin, a little bit of the history. He sniffs the nurse's butt, and he's howling. He's feeling more and more like a dog. And when they go out, he actually gets to go on a date with the nurse. She is very kind to him initially. Love these kind of caricatures that Charles Burns does, and I love this balance of like how he can have one panel here with like this kind of cartoony face where this guy doesn't even have a nose, and then this like kind of a little bit more rendered realistic, but they set that tone of just gross, grimy, lived-in world. But still, pay attention to like the different kind of eyes, like such a unique eye shape for that woman there. But he's in the bar, the lights go down, and he can't find her. I'd know her anywhere. He starts sniffing, and he sniffs this random woman's butt. Her boyfriend gets mad at him. Then we cut back to him at work. The waitress asks him out on a date, and we're out and they're driving. They go to this bar, and they're just getting drunk, having a great time. Dog Boy's showing off. He's doing his tricks. And then they go to park. But a cat comes into the window and distracts Dog Boy. He can't pay attention to the woman, and he runs off. He's crazed. Oh, man, just the kind of rendering, too, because, Charles Burns is known for his very clean style, and how we're seeing this kind of depiction of this very almost like an icon of a cartoon character, how clean it is. It's very precise. And then to see the rendering that he puts on the grass and more organic elements is really interesting. He's really hating that he couldn't fight his urges, and he really messed up again, but he ends up finding this shop, and oh man, there's Rhonda, the waitress he was out with. And when he goes up, these two guys are picking on her. He kicks into like dog mode, and he rips both of their pants, exposing their butts, but he bites at them, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so glad I found you." And she wasn't freaked out at all. She was actually looking for him, and now they leave. So happy little ending for Dog Boy with the cat right there watching them. But then we have Burn Again, kind of like Born Again. So this is our Christian religious parody. I love the splash pages, how he kind of does these like cover images. We have this like strange genie cyclopean god holding this man as he just looks on in terror with the city burning. And we start off with Dog Boy again, so really cool transition here, right? We started with Big Baby going to Dog Boy, and now Dog Boy into this news store, and he's walking down the street when this random guy is shouting about the end of the world and handing out these little pamphlets. And what this guy's handing out is called a chick track, and those were known to be short evangelical gospel stories that would kind of be told in comic format to try to scare people or get people to dedicate their life to Christ. It's like, wow, this thing is really sick. What kind of guy would believe this stuff? And they're saying, "Burn, you're gonna burn. Sinners, heed the word of God. Repent, repent." His name is Mr. Blister. Someone comes and picks him up. He says, "I guess I've put in a full day." He goes away, gets in his car. And so this guy is like this evangelical nut that is trying to like build his big empire. But it is strange. Why is this guy, this big head of the church, why is he out on the street handing out chick tracts? But he goes back home. He's obviously very disturbed. I think his eye design is so interesting. Just the swoop of the brush with a tiny little dot in there. I love seeing it like in the side view. Like the S for the ear, that is just so cool. It's so cool to see what he's breaking down for shapes just to make a recognizable face. goes into this room, he sees light, and all of a sudden he is confronted with God. "Come in, Bliss. It's been quite a while since we've had a chat. Tell me, how are our plans progressing?" And so Blister has either he's lost his mind, right, or he has some kind of divine connection, and he actually is the mouthpiece for God. And so God here, this Cyclops monster, is handing him blueprints for his plans that he wants Blister to carry out. He says, "That's all for now, Bliss. Just remember, I'll be keeping an eye on you." And disappears, and we see that the plans that he's been handed are a plan for like a giant throne. I never imagined God would look so scary. When I was little, I pictured him looking like Santa Claus, only a lot more serious. And I was lucky enough to have a picture of his son on my chest. Well, not a picture, really, a burn, a miraculous burn. And so we get this kind of story of Blister and who he is, that his dad was kind of taking him around, showing him around to these different congregations and touting that he was a miracle, that he had survived this fire. Him and his wife had prayed, and out of the ashes rose his son, and no marks were left on him, save but the mark of Christ. And on his chest is a literal representation of Jesus. And so he's taking them around. People are touching him now, and then they're able to walk. So he's a walking miracle, and he's being sent around America, showing this newfound ability, and of course selling these little Polaroids for 50 cents. And we're seeing more and more that is what the dad is really all about. He's making some big cash off of his son, and his son is just like experiencing these horrors of people that are dying, coming up to him, wanting to touch him, just to feel the presence of God, just to feel safe, just to feel like they could have hope. We're seeing that he ran away to get away from his dad, and he tried to start his own life, went to work at this factory and ended up falling in love with this woman. But he was working and got distracted, and all of a sudden there was an explosion, and he almost died in another fire. But luckily his coworker saved him, the woman he's obsessed with. And when she saved him, she then realized who he was, and said that she once got his picture or met him when she was a child, and they get married. She becomes kind of like the new figure in his life that his father previously held. But we're seeing more and more that he's starting to like take these drugs. He's just like very anxious. But then his dad comes back in his life. He gets big enough again that his dad is able to find him. And then now the dad and his wife begin kind of being the ones that are in charge of his life. And they have these crazy plans. And it turns out that they've built this like gigantic, scary theme park where like half of it is hell and half of it is heaven. And oh my God, this is such a cool drawing. And it shows more of that, like, I love the different rendering that we're doing on both sides. So there's like a very different feeling and atmosphere just in the line work, as well as the architecture. It just totally sells it. I love it. So cool. That would be just the scariest theme park imaginable. And so they're showing it off, like how you can go through heaven and you have these demented, scary, big-eyed angels. You have God, and then you can even go down into hell. And they're just talking about how much money they're making off of this. And then the worst thing imaginable happens. He comes home and he finds his father and his wife together. And so they've become more than just like really close business partners. They are now lovers. His mind is spinning, and this is when he just totally cracks wide open. He's going to use this amusement park, and he goes down into those depths of hell to the lake of fire. He takes his wife and his father down there, and he shoots them both and pushes them into the flames, mopping up the mess. And that's when he has his first psychotic break or divine intervention. And then God appears to him in physical form, first with the eye, and then he fully manifests. It's almost like he's coming up out of the fire. So there's something kind of scary there, right? Like, is he Satan? Is he God? It's a little bit of both, I think. This is where he starts to get his mission. And he says, if you don't do what I say, if you're not going to bring my plan into action, into fruition, then you will burn forever. He already has a history of surviving a fire, and the idea of burning forever is too real for him. And we see that fear as he's dreaming. Oh man, such cool rendering here. And I think it's even cooler because we haven't really seen it on any of the human figures yet. But I love, we got the clean view of him here, and then that charred, just like husk of him in the flames of hell. So scary. He's not really sleeping. He's just breaking more and more as he's getting closer and closer to pulling off God's plan. Now some agents, like government agents, are in on it, and they are trying to like get in to see what his plan is. They know that this guy's up to no good and he's got too much power. And he's using like his television show and everything to really boost this new plan that he has. And the plan is that they're building this gigantic temple. As the time is getting closer, as God's plan is about to be enacted, he is kind of just having a mental break more and more. He's just getting put into bed. They're telling him, hey, we're going to keep this going. The agents are getting closer and closer to figuring out what he's doing. They're trying to get someone on the inside. Like, look at all of these different faces and every different style. But we're kind of seeing how God is starting to kind of like breach its way into the human consciousness of this world. We're seeing this like Cyclops God appear in this cult, in this child that's born. And then we're even having a little insert here of Charles Burns himself, and they're saying based in Tacoma, Washington, and they're showing some of his comics. And it's super cool because this is actually a reference to some comics that appeared in Raw Volume 2, Number 1. In this story, Teen Plague. And Teen Plague was definitely an early precursor of Black Hole. There's a lot of similar concepts in here, but there's actually a couple panels that are used from this comic. We have this awesome sequence of this guy's head ripping open and there being an eyeball inside there. And they actually have a little insert of it in this panel. The news of his temple is finding out, and he's saying that it's kind of like an ark. It's like a place where believers can come and they can be saved from the end of the world, and they'll be taken off Earth with God. The news is covering it. It's just getting bigger and bigger. It's causing like mass hysteria, and they're just bringing people up by like the bus load just to get them in this compound. And the max capacity that they have is 20,000 people. So they're kind of hitting the end, and that's when people are starting to get more and more worried. You know, we're getting the countdown. They knew when it was going to be the end of the world, and now people are starting to storm the complex. They're having to blow up the bridge that connects the compound to the outside world, and we're just getting more and more of the terror setting in as people are kind of getting ready for this new world. And now we're getting a view into the temple as we're seeing it's kind of like this big prison where people are just getting put into a uniform and then put into their bunker. This is a really awesome interpretation of a chick track, and putting that into a comic is a great mode of storytelling. I love how that's being incorporated. We got it so early in the story and it's really paying off at the very end. And I love how Blister is being really simplified down here, almost like a Monopoly Man kind of character. And then we have that interpretation of the Cyclops God. You know, we're getting closer and closer. People have been living in this place for a while. They're getting all fattened up. And then we see that God is approaching, or something is. There's a rocket in space heading toward Earth. There's like some Kirby energy here, which it's like, that's so cool to see coming out of Charles Burns. But the spaceship docks, you know, Jesus came back for his church, came back for his bride. And then we have God appearing in the throne that Bliss built for him, and appearing the same way of first the eye and then the full form. And everyone's just like dazed, and now more people are finally seeing this God outside of just Bliss. But of course, now with this kind of like alien craft coming onto American soil, we start to get the government reacting and sending these fighter jets to actually shoot this and kind of like figure out what's going on. In the terror and in the attack of the planes, God's spacecraft starts to take back off and undock, and we see that people that were like mid-transition then start falling out and they're burning. And then we've got some people going through the rubble because it's like the whole compound was destroyed in that, and not everyone made it onto God's ship because it was cut so short. And as they're searching to see if anyone's alive, there's skeletons and everything, but we hear a voice, and it seems to be Bliss. He's starting to have a flashback to when he was a boy in the fire, because now once again trapped under the rubble of a fire, we find Bliss, and we finally get the reveal that no, he did not get that burn from the fire. His father actually branded him with that Jesus face. So his father manufactured this miracle so he could hawk his fake religion, fake miracle, and just get a bunch of money off of these suckers. Such a scary image of Bliss as he's just screaming, crying, getting that burn on his chest. His father then gives him a little bit of drugs, and it's just making him have these horrible nightmares. Oh, just so scary. Then after giving him the burn, he then is going to put him in this like coffin, seal him up, and set the house on fire so that he can live, and then he'll pull him out. He's got to make the miracle believable. So he's having a flashback to that. Now he's once again buried, and Dad, down here, let me out of here, Dad. So he thinks once again he's like a boy again, and his dad is the one looking for him. But it turns out it's these two guys in their like hazmat suits going through the rubble. But they pull him out, and now we reveal that he had a manufactured miracle originally that his father put together. But now we see a true miracle has happened, and we see who caused the miracle, and it's Satan. Now he's left with the true mark of the beast. And we end on A Marriage Made in Hell. And this is the story that originally appeared in Raw Magazine number 6. Now, I don't have Raw Magazine number 6, but luckily there's an awesome website, The Great Comic Book Heroes, posted the images of this that were originally in Raw. There's a copyright here for 1984, and this was published by Penguin Books in 1992. So good amount of time between here, and we can definitely see, he's taken another stab at the drawing. Love the new interpretation that he's taken, and I think that it works really nicely in context. It's kind of a fun way to see like what it originally was. They're walking into their new home. In this original interpretation, there's flames in the background. Now he's just taken away the home, and they're truly just, now they're in hell. It's not until we get to kind of like the guts of the story that some of the panels are staying the same. A lot of this intro is all brand new. He kind of took the story and gave it a new intro and outro, so kind of gave it brand new bumpers. Man, really cool rendering. More style shifts here as we see this just like dead, decaying man next to this cartoony face. Our storyteller here, our kind of like reference point in this version is this woman that is a writer, and she's sitting here trying to write. She says, "Gosh, if I don't come up with a good yarn for spooky love stories, I'll really be in hot water. The deadline is Thursday." But we do see this seems to be kind of a story about her. It's the same kind of same lady. She's got a little bit of a different updo. But we see that this woman comes home from her wedding, and she's instantly shown her own bedroom, and they're not going to have a shared marital bedroom. So, red flags right away. And so here's the original page next to me. You can see that we've kept those first two panels, and I really love the caption boxes that he does for these and the kind of like chapter marks, but we're getting different panels added and different structure to the layouts. So really cool to see an artist reapproach a story that they did years ago and just think about how they could have done it better, what needed more context, how could they flesh some stuff out. So we just see this woman, she's a trad wife, keeping the house nice, guys out working, and she's so bored at home by herself. She's cleaned everything. Maybe John's study needs a dusting again. Haven't noticed these magazines before. And she looks and she's pretty shocked because a page of the magazine has been ripped out. And she goes to the library and she finds that magazine, and there's a picture of John, her husband, in there with another woman. You can see more of just how these panels were basically just recut and laid out, maybe extended in certain spots. But mostly it is a retelling of this. And she is starting to feel doubt. She just thinks he's been up to something. She's getting closer and closer with the librarian. They go out to eat, and she's going back home. And when she's walking down the street, she sees someone that looks just like her husband. And she's like, "What? He couldn't be here. He's supposed to be on a work trip." And then she follows him. And when she goes inside, she's clubbed over the head, falls over, wakes up tied up, and there's a mysterious woman there. It's revealed that it's John, it's her husband. But there's a little bit more to it. That woman that she originally saw in that picture with him actually was his mistress. She was somebody, like an actress that came over to sing for the troops and then ended up sleeping with a few of them. And she was with John on base, and they were bombed by a plane. And in the wreckage, they found the two bodies, and they believed it to be John, and they had to do all this facial reconstruction, and they had to recreate the body basically, and they did it believing it was John, and it ended up being that John had died in the bomb, and the body that they had actually found was the actress, and they had made her look like John. So she was living this hell, trying to maybe I can just shut up and do it, and I can just be this husband, obviously losing his mind a bit. Says, "You still don't understand, do you, Lydia? John Doe was burnt to a crisp, and since you loved him so much, I'm sure you're anxious to join him." So she's about to burn Lydia, the wife, when all of a sudden the librarian comes in with bam, 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 and shoots John dead and saves Lydia and carries her out. And that is how the original actually ends on just them kissing. So in this version, we just end on this outro of the writer being like, "I love it. It's just perfect for spooky love stories. It's hot and steamy and, honey, where are you? Oh my God, it's him. What's he doing home? She's freaking out. And we see that she is actually married to someone that kind of looks like John. He's a little bit different, but she stamps out her cigarette, looks terrified. Oh man, scary look as he's just peeking through the door. She says, there you are. I got off work early and say, what's going on back here? I was just typing a letter to my mother. Oh really? So what's the television on? And what's this? Cigarettes. It stinks like a bar in here. She's trying to blame that her friend came by and says, gosh darn it, honey, this is getting out of hand. There are some things in life that are more important than writing letters and watching TV. Look, I have a job to do, and you have a job to do. Your job is to turn this house into a home. Got it? Yes, John, as she looks at the audience. So our trad wife here doesn't really want to be one, and she was looking for escape through her storytelling. Man, such a fun story, and I love just like that extra lens of seeing how it was originally published in raw to this format. Really cool. And we end on such an awesome self-portrait of Charles Burns. Pretty freaky. Charles Burns was born in Washington, D.C. in 1955 and currently lives in Philadelphia with his wife, painter Susan Moore, and his 2 daughters. He seems to be like drawing on like a piece of skin that's like flayed out on his table like he's about to tattoo it. Man, pretty freaky. That has been Charles Burns' Skin Deep, published in 1992 by Penguin Books. I think what I really respond to with Skin Deep and what the themes of these stories kind of play to is kind of like that American traditional family or the American traditional heritage and what he's kind of trying to push back on with, traditional gender roles with Married in Hell and the role that the church has in our lives with Burn Again, obviously a play on Born Again. So I definitely respond to a lot of those themes that I think that's why this book really speaks to me. I think these are really fun stories. And if this episode lit a fire under you and you want to check out some more comics, why not check out some of mine? I'm a self-published cartoonist, and you can check out all my comics on DaneGeorges.com, where you can check out my series Doomskull, which is about an ex-supervillain that works at a grocery store with his minion Bag Boy. I have 3 issues of that, with a 4th on the way. I also have X-Ray, which is a collection of my 4-panel webcomics that I post on Instagram, Webtoons, and Tabastic, as well as some zines like The Passenger, Sleepless Sights, and Jigglybub. You can check all this out and way more on my website, DaneGeorges.com. And remember to subscribe because I post a new episode every week so you don't want to miss out. But until next week, remember to think and read dangerously.